But I am a church consultant. I work for Kairos and Associates. We're an organization out of St. Paul, and we work with churches and Bible camps and social service agencies and those kinds of things all over the country, helping churches to raise resources for the dreams that God kind of stirs within them. So that's kind of the primary thing that we do. We help churches and other organizations when they are wanting to do anything from brand new churches to church renovations to expansions to debt retirement, those kinds of things. So subsequently, we also do a lot of work with churches in helping them to develop what we talk a lot about, cultures of generosity. And so we talk a lot about stewardship and help churches to kind of maneuver through creating some positive and life-giving and optimistic ways of dealing with resources and money, and talking about those things in ways that really elicit the best of the joy of giving. We also help churches to do quite a bit of, what kind of say, long-range planning, so strategic thinking and discernment, and sometimes reorganizing things like ministry, goals and objectives, and help with leadership and those sorts of things. So kind of a broad spectrum of things. We began conversation some time back. Trying to think, boy, Pastor Craig and I probably, I bet it was, a couple of years ago when we first started having some conversation. Pastor Craig knows our owner, Jeff Chelberg, well, and Kairos is an organization that kind of gets around, so we've worked with a lot of different churches, and started some conversation in which it was clear that things were stirring and going on here. Some conversations have been initiated, growth and dreaming and those kinds of things, and so kind of began then a process that drew us in here in the fall to begin creating some steps and stages toward what we pray will be a time of being able to really dream big and invite people's generosity for the sake of some renovation and expansion here at Good Shepherd. Those things haven't all come together clearly. You are mindful of some of those conversations. But the first step or phase of the work that we do is to kind of take a time of what we call listening. We have 4 phases of the work that we do, and the first one is listening, okay, kind of listening and discovery. And we do that in a variety of different ways. Not the least of them is why we're here today. We invited you and the congregation to take a church survey. This is a Kairos-developed tool, this mission assessment profile that you did, and many others as well. And that helps to give us some data, helps us give us some perspective on kind of what's in the mix, what's stirring, what are things to pay attention to as begin to be deliberate about taking some steps forward. Do a couple of other things as well in this kind of this listening phase of this work. The other one is not only, so this was the church survey, the map, but then the other one is what we're doing tomorrow, both at noon and in the evening, when we have invited, I think that we have altogether between both of those sessions, I think we've got about 25 community leaders who are going to be here at Good Shepherd. And they have been invited. These are everything from social service leaders to policymakers to business people to people working with housing-related things, people from the schools, fire, police, those kinds of leaders who have been invited to come and have some discussion or some conversation with us around the topic of how are things going with our neighbors? What's the condition? What's the situation? What are people wrestling with out in the broader Bismarck area? The ultimate focus point isn't only kind of what are they discovering and what are they seeing, but it really keys in and focuses in on where are they seeing not just needs, but where are they seeing unmet needs? Because those things are things that the church has particular interest in as a church who has been granted Christ's compassion and love to be loving and caring and reaching out to our neighbors. So what's happening with our neighbors? generally what we find is we've all got some idea about some of that stuff, but in these gatherings, we will discover things that are really under the radar. So you're encouraged to come back to one of those, which are tomorrow as well. And then finally, when we kind of get clearer about what we think is going to be the proposed plan, and there's still stuff that's in the mix for a possible expansion or renovation, those kinds of things, then I'll be back out here and spend a number of days and just sitting down and meeting with as many of you as I can I want to kind of hear, what's your read on Good Shepherd? How are you involved? What do you see that the church needs to be paying attention to? And then also to get some very personal feedback on your sense of what will be at that point a kind of a proposed plan for these big next step for the church, and to invite you to begin thinking about. There's no big plan is going to come to fruition without almost everyone kind of finding their way to contribute and help to support such a thing. So that is the beginning of that kind of a conversation. So that'll be happening in the next perhaps couple of months or so. So those are all part of this listening and discovery. I live in just a little bit west of Minneapolis. I was a parish pastor for 20 plus years, serving there and in Arizona. My wife Erin and I, we have 6 kids. 4 of them are gone, and 2 still at home. And so we're better than 50% right now. But now they're home because of college, and they think they can keep coming home. So long as they will transition back. I'm just kidding, but it's good to have them, sort of. Let me just begin by saying thank you for, I presume most all of you would have taken that MAP survey. So today is about walking through some of those results. What I encourage you to do, you've obviously got it in print in front of you, is to be jotting notes or questions, because this is really kind of the beginning, if you will, of a conversation. The material or the discoveries here will be used for charting a little bit of some of the path forward with regard to thinking about this matter of a capital campaign and the church's next steps and those sorts of things. But also, as you might imagine, this is great information for church leadership, for staff, to be considering taking some of the guesswork out of a variety of things. So it will be a document, a kind of a living, breathing source of life at Good Shepherd that will be able to be used in a variety of ways. So I'm going to kind of walk us through these things, and like I said, you can take some notes. You're welcome to ask for clarification. We will, toward the end, we'll definitely do that, where I'm going to ask you to share some things that are occurring to you, things that you really have maybe surprise you, some questions that you maybe have, but don't hesitate to go ahead and illuminate that as we go. So, the missional assessment profile, it is a measurement of your congregation's impact, effectiveness, and potential, okay, as a way to be thinking about it. It's the beginning of discovery and discernment. It's not the end, right? This is not an end product as such. This is a resource for us. It's not designed to tell you what to do, but rather where energy and resources can more effectively be placed. Again, taking the guesswork out of it. What we like to say, with what we discover here, we're able to make better decisions in less time and with more confidence, okay? Churches, you guys have done some survey work, I know, but a lot of times churches have traditionally been a little bit suspect of working with numbers and things like data and those sorts of things, thinking that the Holy Spirit would never use such things, right? But we really see that there's some great benefit to having a little bit more preciseness in understanding some about congregational life. So it's an assessment of ministry's current state and the perceptions of those who engage with it. It's not a judgment of it, right? Because we can always be doing better, so we know that. This is who took the survey. We had 264 respondents, and you can see the age breakdown. I don't know how that compares demographically to the congregation. So 7% under 35 took the survey, 39 and 40% in that middle demographic, and then 14% over. If you wonder how that, of course, every congregation is different, right? But we have a lot of congregations we work with where the majority of those who will take the survey are in those upper couple demographics, and very few people. We always kind of feel concerned that we've got so few people who take, the survey who are under that 35, to which I'll nod my head and say, yep, but it's almost across the board. For whatever be the reasons, we could probably guess at that, but don't feel that you're out of the ordinary in having a lot of younger folks who simply didn't, for the most part, end up taking the survey. Obviously, it's a very high level of education. Some 90+% are some college or vocational training and above. And then the tenure, which is a good mix. 77% of you have been here for 10 years or longer, but you've also got almost a fourth is in that mix of 10 years or under. So that means there's some vitality, and that's evidence of growth as well, as you might imagine. Asked what people's worship attendance patterns were. Most people are here most of the time. It used to be that regular church attendance meant people who went to church just about every week, and across the nation we see significant changes in people's worship and religious behaviors, and so now people will identify themselves as being a regular member and a regular worshiper if they're attending once a month or more. Okay, so the fact that you've got a high percentage here, in fact, you're higher than the average that we see. We've got a part of what I'm going to share with you on a few of these is some kind of data comparisons on the most recent. We've got about 20, looking at about the most recent 20,000 respondents that we have in our database, so we can kind of see, because we're always interested. It's like, well, okay, that's who we are, but how does that look, compared to other churches? Distance to church, most folks are within 5 miles. You're very much a neighborhood congregations, but you've got people who also are taking a little bit of a drive. And not quite half of those who took the survey have got kids at home. These are a few ways that we're going to be looking at on the next page here, the data, how that's going to be presented. All of the statements that are in the map, in the survey, all presume, in a Christian setting, an affirmative response. Okay, so there's no trick questions. So you can look down and ideally, we would be in agreement with all of the statements that are made. Right? For instance, I believe that God is active in the world today. Most people of faith would say, yes, I absolutely agree with that. What we're looking for, though, is we're looking for where it is that those responses have more of a absolutely kind of a thing, a strongly agree with that statement. Of course, some people argue that Lutherans are never going to really be on that strongly agree end of things, right? But that's where we're looking, because we want to know where that strength really wells up, or the experience wells up within the congregation, so that it's a strongly agree. On the middle, neither agree nor disagree. Those are kind of sitting on the fence, if you will. We also want to pay attention to where, on some of these inquiries, some of the statements, where there's a significant portion of the congregation that are on the fence. And the reason why we want to pay attention to those is because we've learned that if you focus on the issue at hand, what you do next with that will have people ultimately lean then one way or the other. They'll get off the fence and they'll lean more into an agree or into a disagree. So on some of these where we've got a significant measurement there, we're going to want to pay attention. And you can see each one has kind of a chart that looks at distribution piece. What we have is we have a map, right? This is our own graphic of the promised land where we all find ourselves in one way or the other. What we see is that as we crunch the data, that churches end up having a sense of living in sort of one of four different characteristics or definitions or way to understand where you're doing life. Kind of a stationary area, a nostalgic, puzzled, and possibility. So let me give you a little bit of definition on each one of these. Churches that find themselves to be in kind of a stationary kind of a place. Generally, this landscape is a place where ministry is happening, but it doesn't feel like much movement or growth is being experienced. This location says we feel stuck, okay? We work with a lot of churches that feel stuck, okay? And each of these, they may have you come to mind of where Good Shepherd is. It might have you come to mind where Good Shepherd used to be, and it might bring to mind another faith community as these are described. Nostalgic is a landscape where it's a place where the church is enjoying a time of comfort, if you will, in what they have done, but doesn't show much enthusiasm for taking those next steps into the future. The location tends to say, the view is just fine from here. And as you imagine, there's almost always a draw to nostalgia, right? We do a lot of looking back over our shoulders. Sometimes churches talk a lot about the glory years or the way things were and those kinds of things, okay? So that's kind of that nostalgic area. Puzzled, the landscape that has an identity issue. It's not clearly knowing who or what they are, while at the same time having a lot of desire to start making something happen. This location says, which way should we go? Okay. And then finally, possibilities is a landscape that's well positioned, allowing for a ministry to make bold decisions, advance their mission in new and renewed ways. The location has that sort of orientation that says, let's get going. Okay? So unless you looked ahead, which I should have told you not to, my question to you is how would you sense or define Good Shepherd? Was there one of those that seems to kind of be it? But because you already looked ahead probably. But here's the grand reveal, okay? And you can see by the compass down there, when we look at all of the data, Good Shepherd can understand itself to be in that location of possibilities, which says, got good things going on. There's a significant spirit of optimism. There's a significant spirit of trust, kind of can-do, a higher level of satisfaction, and oftentimes has congregations then having that sense of, let's get going. What do we need to be about? So I'll just pause there. Does that ring true for you, or would you name any of the other ones that feel also somewhat defining for Good Shepherd? Or said differently, do you have a sense with which you have come from one of those landscape areas into this area of kind of more possibilities? Puzzled and possibilities going together. Yeah, oftentimes, yes, because the puzzle piece can be, as it was defined there a little bit, stuff stirring, but we're not completely clear on where we're going. And in fact, you're so strongly in that possibility is in part because that's in relationship to our database. And so it's in relationship to that. But otherwise, yes, you would be leaning more, coming kind of out of the puzzle. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's just that your data on the whole is generally more favorable and optimistic when we look at the larger database that we have. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Yeah, this is 20,000 respondents is what this database is, and so it's probably 130 churches. Is that right? Something like that. No, yeah. Yeah, I know, right? Don't ask me those trick questions. Not in front of everybody. But it is, I know it's 20,000 is our cutoff on the numbers, right? And so, like, you guys are making up 250 of those. We have a lot who are 50 and 80. Yep. All right. So let's take a walk through some of our discoveries here. You can see up in the upper right-hand corner, each of them is going to be labeled in terms of kind of a characteristic, and that says belonging. So we've got a couple of them here. I feel a greater sense of belonging in this congregation the more I participate in its ministries, right? Well, that's kind of an intuitive statement. And we have 32% strongly agree, 53% agree, and we've got relatively few who are kind of on the fence. We've got 13% on the fence, and we've got some who just disagree, and even a percent that strongly disagree. You can put your eyes down to the next one down as well, and you can see that we've also got strongly disagree and disagree there too. Some of those will go, we'll find those moving all the way through the survey results, and it's not unusual. So part of that just simply indicates that there is a small percentage for whom, even though everyone else is feeling like this is the cat's meow, right? There are a few who are not on board with that, or they're not experiencing much of that. So we want to be paying attention to that, even though that's a small number. Sometimes that small number can be outright consternation or conflict. People who are upset or mad, or just strongly in opposition to the church's leadership or the direction that the church is going. Sometimes that's what that indicates as well. But it's all a part of our whole family together. By the way, you're about 5 percentage points ahead of the average on that. So if you want to know, that's a stronger than usual kind of response. In this congregation, I am part of something bigger than myself. Obviously, like when you have your mission and ministry invitation in worship, that's all that draw to have people involved, right, in worship, but then also in the broader life of the congregation. And this is getting at this question of whether or not, as people are here at Good Shepherd, they have that sense with which that they're not just an individual floating around, but rather they are involved and a part of a significant endeavor. And again, you've got the vast majority of people who affirm that and say yes, indeed. The next one is still kind of on the spirit of belonging. I would describe this congregation as a cohesive community, right? Having that sense with which we're all on the same page. And again, here we've got about 70% who agree or strongly agree. But we've also got about a fourth who are on the fence, right? So while people have a strong sense of that this is a place in which you can become involved and have a sense of being connected, the experience of being unified or cohesive isn't something that maybe people kind of say, I'm not so sure. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Are we together? Yes, we are. But this can have a lot to do with clarity around mission, clarity around vision, clarity around answering that question of where are we going, what are we doing? Okay? I see myself as an integral part of this congregation. And again, here we see we've got about a third, a little bit higher, who are in the middle here. But we've got most people who have a sense that they are. And that's about on par. Most congregations are kind of right about in those same numbers. Here we're going to look at energy or excitement. I believe this congregation is making a difference in people's lives. And here you can see almost everyone is on the plus side of this, right? We've got very few who disagree with that. So you're not only doing things, you're engaging, but people know that and are experiencing that or involved in that. This place matters is another way of describing that. I like telling others about what is going on in this congregation. And here, you're ahead of the curve in relationship to many churches, but we've still got, we've got 30% or so who are either on the fence or say, that's not exactly something that I find myself talking with others about. Was one of the points I know in Pastor Julie's sermon today, right? She talked about evangelism, sharing the good news, right? So that's kind of a piece of this. Some of the value, at least as I see the survey, the results have value? Well, yes, of course. But part of what has value is it just simply is stating ways of understanding or goals or objectives within a congregation's life. And sometimes you're going to find a few of them that's going to stick out that say, that characterization is something we want to noodle on more, right? We want to pay attention to more. We want to work at, okay? And you'll see, again, as some of the language will move along here. Participating in this congregation energizes me. Here, what I want to have you take note of is the shift between some of the questions that are having you make an objective qualification or experience or evaluation of the congregation, and then ones like this is now it's talking about me. I'm not just talking about Good Shepherd, right? This one says participating in this congregation energizes me. Okay, so there's that shift between ones that are looking at the whole and ones where those questions are very, very personal. And here we've got a strong, some 80% do have that sense of personal connection. I enjoy inviting people I know to worship at this congregation. And again, we've got, you're far stronger. You might wonder, statistically, what does that look like? You're significantly stronger on both the agree and the strongly agree than most congregations. And there are a lot of things that are in back of what has us invite people to worship, right? I mean, if somebody's worshiping somewhere else, well, we're not about trying to say, well, hey, come on over, If they're happy where they are, we're not too inclined to extend that invitation. And there's just plain apprehensive sometimes about that. But you have you have stuff that's going on here. The experience of being a part of the Good Shepherd family rises to a significant level that many of you extend that invitation. Many of you share some about what's going on with life here. We're going to look at a few what we call missional landmarks, okay? Where we're going to just take a snapshot of kind of the overall culture, and I'll show you what is meant by each of those. Kind of ministry practice, how do you do ministry? Does that work? Does that engage people? Readiness. If you're in the land of possibilities, or any of them, and you're considering taking some steps, what's your disposition with regard to that? And then if you remember in the survey too, you were asked if you were to invest additional energies and resources into different ministry areas, which would those priorities be? So we're going to answer the question congregationally, what those priorities are. When we look at culture, we're looking at these three things. Permeability, in other words, the ease with which people can be involved, get connected, right? Or is that confusing, or is that hard? Does nobody invite me? Respect and trust both have to do significantly with leadership. All right. I feel like a valued part of this congregation. There are just a couple of them that have strong similarities in some of the other language that we have already looked at. So I feel like a valued part of this congregation. Again, we've got about 70% who agree, that sense with being necessary or integral. And we've got here you can see we've got all of a sudden we've got 9% who are disagree or strongly disagree. So that's, it's almost 10% who are kind of on the periphery. So we've got some who aren't experiencing that. We all know that can be due to something having to do with ministry practice, interaction, relationships. It can also have to do with the fact that sometimes Tim Johnson just doesn't want to be involved. I'll sit in the back corner pew, both literally and figuratively, and thank you very much. So I might not feel valued, which might not have anything to do with you. It might have to do with me. And of course, we don't know the answer to that. But there are some who are not. They're not connected, and you add that to the 21%, and it says, that's something we want to pay attention to. It's easy to engage with the ministries of this congregation. Here we've got not quite a fourth who strongly agree with that. We've got 56% who agree with that, and here again, about a fourth, not quite a fourth, who are on the fence there. Nonetheless, you have a stronger than average kind of an experience of that compared to other churches. So, anybody have a highlight of why is it that people get involved here? What's the magic? What's in the water that impacts that has that generally favorable? Okay. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. That's a good observation. There's no question. Even churches that have two services it's not unusual for people to say, I feel like we have two churches, And so then that becomes, how that's managed, right? How do we talk about that? And those things. But you're absolutely right. That's a tall order to have a sense of being cohesive when we are gathering. And in some ways, there's some real distinctiveness within each of those settings. Yep. So it's not a bad thing, right? It's just a kind of reality thing. Yep. Anyone else? But that whole matter of welcome, I can't tell you how many churches that we work with that has that matter of increasing and extending welcome. A joyful, friendly welcome is at the very top of the things that they need to work on. So for that to be something that is experienced or emulated here, you're ahead of the pack. It's huge. In this congregation here, we're going to talk a little bit about respect. Okay, it says in the upper right there. Sharing a difference of opinion is welcomed. And we've got about 39, right, for almost 40% who are on the fence there. 42 agree, 11 strongly agree, and you can see the figures about 10% who are, 8% between the two, on strongly disagree and disagree. Tell me when you took this, or when you see this statement, what does that have you think about? Sharing a difference of opinion. Does that have you contextually think about a moment or a time or a experience? What's your reference point there? Yeah, but we're glad you're here. Yeah, wow, okay. Yep, yep, yep. Okay, interesting. Yep. A lot of times when there's great clarity that defines who we are, you're either in or you're out. Can be some of that. Okay. Anyone else have anything to share about when you look at this statement? Is it? Hmm. Yep. 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 Nice. Okay. Yep. Well, and the question again, for instance, if you were thinking about something like a Bible study, it might have you be like, oh my gosh, yes, that's so great. And somebody else might read that and they might think congregational life and decisions. No, it's not unusual when I have one-on-ones, and I'll talk with people about that in churches where that's kind of like goes high, and for people to say, truth be known, I don't know, I didn't have a reference point. That's why I put it in the middle. I don't know that I could tell you when we're really exchanging differences of opinion. Worked with a church where they were really, really strong in the middle and on the disagree. And I was curious. I'm like, what in the world? And so as I started to explore that a little bit more, I found out that the issue of the flag, right, and where it was, and that it had been moved, was an issue because and it had been moved, I don't know, moved out, and then somebody put a new flagpole up and all that, and I thought, oh wow, that was and I mean, people talked like it was a raw kind of a thing. And so then when I finally, I said, well, when did that happen? And I thought, my gosh, this is fresh. This is in the last year or something. It had been 12 years. 12 years before, and it was just like it was yesterday. So it's not that we're not going to have conflict or differences of opinion. What is it that we do with that, right? Okay, sure. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Mm-hmm. 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 Sure. Yep. As churches, we're really good about holding on to things, right? Anyway, yeah, so just kind of something that we're mindful of, right? And it doesn't mean that there's an issue or problem by any means, but it is something that we say, oh, the matter of paying attention to people's opinions is an important one. And let's really work to make sure that we're, as best we can, be doing it really well. This next one's a little bit different. Congregational members learn from the diversity of people who participate in this congregation. You have more on the affirmative than most churches. And sometimes people feel a little bit troubled about, well, I don't think we have any issues or problems. And the issue a lot of times that's not stronger is the reality is we're just pretty homogenous in a lot of our settings. So it's like, we just don't have this, unless you're going to talk about the difference between the Swedes and the Norwegians, or, vital issues. But other words, in other ways, though, diversity just simply isn't something that we're experiencing a whole lot, especially upper Midwest, and even, I think, even in Lutheran congregations, as much as the church would like to be advancing the cause of that, I think sometimes our reality is that we're not so much. Thinking a little bit about trust, congregation leaders are transparent in their decision making. Here we've got the significant majority of people who affirm that, and we've got about a third, a little more than a third, who are on the fence there. Another one, which kind of has to do with some decision making, leaders in the congregation manage finances effectively, but all this kind of has to do with matters of trust. And again, this is something so oftentimes that either does or doesn't have a context, right? I mean, when you're looking at that, transparent decision making, It can be that people say, yeah, everything's fine. We don't have an issue here. But sometimes I've had so many conversations where people will say, part of my being in the middle on this is I don't feel like I'm as informed as I could be, and that's mine, you know. And so sometimes that's what draws a little bit more into that. Is there anything here that today or at some point in the future, is there anything there that feels is relevant for some future conversation? Or does that speak to you in any way? Doesn't need to, but it might. Yeah, of course, part of this too is in a congregation as large as Good Shepherd, your decision making oftentimes has been entrusted to your leaders, right? I mean, this whole place is not going to operate really effectively by consensus on all kinds of things, and so. But that whole matter of transparency is just an important one to say. Well, we want to continue to be as transparent as is possible. Someone was sharing with me, you finished the year over and above financially, and not everybody's saying that right now. So that's a kudos. That's very positive. When making decisions, the leadership represents the desires of the congregation. Somewhat of a similar question, right? Again, simply kind of illuminates how important those things are. Yeah. Looking at ministry practice a little bit, we're going to think about faith integration, right? What's the connection between the experience here and my day-to-day life, clarity, purpose, faith formation, connectedness or relationships, and inspiration. My faith informs my daily behaviors. You guys are kind of off the charts here. It's very, very strong. In fact, look at that. I just noticed there's no one on the disagree. So, and boy, if you could, right, I mean, as a faith community, we've got all kinds of goals and objectives, right? But isn't that one of them? I mean, isn't it kind of at the top, right? That what we're doing and what we're experiencing here, that, we take that home and we take that to our relationships and our families and our day-to-day lives, and helps to integrate. Again, I'll go back to Pastor Julie's sermon. It's making those baptismal connections, right? In all sorts of ways. So that is to say, hitting on most all cylinders. Faith is a part of my entire life. And again, we've got super, super strong. What do you attribute that to? Because you're stronger than most congregations for sure on both of those. What's the magic sauce? Okay, yeah. Yep. Connecting the dots. Yep. Making it accessible. Yep. Language that hits home. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes in other kinds of surveys that are done, that's top of the list for what it is that people are looking for in their faith community, right? Is that matter of relevance, especially in preaching. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. You bet it does. Yeah. sure not. We like to say that not only are there a lot of ways to raise money, there are a lot of bad ways to raise money, right? Thank you. Somebody else had something. Yes. You're absolutely right. And it is oftentimes the most frequently identified factor for why people are where they are. It's that they have a strong sense of belonging, right? More so than other things. And one could argue that that's so critical, that's so important for obvious reasons, but that so many other things flow out of that. If you have a sense of belonging, then you can have a sense of, you can have an opportunity to grow, to discover, to work, to serve. But boy, it's hard without that first initial strong sense of belonging. Yeah, thank you. Good feedback. So that whole matter of faith in daily life is huge. What I said differently again, what I experience at church influences my life throughout the week. Again, it's a different way of stating that, and again, you're strong here as you might imagine. Here we're going to look at a couple of things having to do with clarity of purpose on ministry practice. Our sense of mission is an important component for decision making in this congregation. And here we've got about 80% who agree or strongly agree with that, with about a fifth there, a little bit on the fence. Toss out an element or a component of what your mission is. So that's my question, right? What's so that's so strong and significant. What's a feature of your mission? What's a feature of Good Shepherd's mission? How would you name that or a part of that? You're all affirming it so strongly, so I'm going to put it to the test. Okay, welcoming to all. It's part of your mission, okay? What would you add to that? Okay, okay. Yep. Okay. Okay, something for everybody. Yep, and strong youth or youth and family, children's ministry. Yep. Oh, yes, yeah. Yep, that there's something for everybody here, and kind of contextualizing that with youth ministry, and there's a place of welcoming all people. Anything else that rises high on the list? Okay, place is open to more than just our own family, to the broader community. Okay. Anything else that is a kind of a driver of your decision making because it's sort of central to your missional identity, if you will? What would you add to that? Service to others. Okay. Yep. It's a part of who you are, part of what you do. Do you have a specific mission phrase or statement that you use so much that everybody knows it? If I said all in unison now, okay, yeah. Which doesn't mean you don't have a missional focus, right? But and sometimes that's something that, that's part of my miserable drive here yesterday was listening to that game. Sharing the shepherd's love. Okay. Yep. Okay. With what? Okay, with all of God's children. Yep. Okay. Yep. We're taking care of things, and people not only here, but well beyond. Okay? Right. That matter of loving our neighbor, and who is my neighbor? And you define that in some ways that matter. As a congregation, we have a clear sense of purpose. Again, here we've got about 2/3 who say yes. We've got some right on the fence. So this can simply mean maybe there's some opportunity here for distilling that or speaking it or those kinds of things. I believe in the mission of this congregation, and here you're just about 85%. Okay, now this happens with almost every church. I'll go back a slide. As a congregation, we have a clear sense of purpose. We've got, we've got maybe a third who are like, I don't know, right? And the next question is, do you believe in the mission of this congregation? Well, yeah. Right? Sometimes, I'm not sure I can tell you exactly what it is, but I really believe in it. Yeah, I think it's good, right? But again, strong affirmation of that. Again, man, this is part of what we're wired for, is to be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. Here, looking at faith formation, outreach opportunities. We just talked about that for a moment. In this congregation are important to my faith development. Again, take note, some of these are personal, right? So this is not just trying to evaluate the congregation, but here, does this connect with me? And we'll see a little bit of oftentimes kind of a lesser strong responses for that, right? I can look at the church as a whole and be like, hey, thumbs up. But when it comes to me, I'm like, well, yeah, kind of, sort of. And we've got, 30% there, about a third maybe, who are a little bit in the middle. And part of that, too, statistically even, is that people who will state affirmatively their involvement in congregational ministry in a significant way, that when it comes to outreach ministries, it's not the same percentage of people who are involved or engaged in that. Again, I'll reference tomorrow lunch and tomorrow evening is this whole matter of that broader community, right? The outreach. Being involved in a group in this congregation is important to my faith development. When I sit down with couples or one-on-ones, families sometimes, and I'll ask them what connects you or what keeps you here. If individuals are a part of a small group, across the board, that'll be their first response, almost always, which is to say, small group ministry has a way of connecting and deepening people's relationships and faith in ways that aren't matched the same in other ways. So this is trying to get at this question of, how are we doing there? And not unusual, we've got a number of people who affirm that, and then we've got a number of people who say, that could be a little bit stronger for me. The worship experience in this congregation plays an important role in nurturing my faith. Super strong. Strong preaching. So I haven't been to worship here before, right? So I come in and I'm really enjoying the worship, the music and everything. So I'm in a lot of churches, right? And a lot of churches that do, more contemporary styled music and songs and that kind of thing. And there's a point, I'm pretty sure it was in the first song, maybe it was in the second song. I all of a sudden thought to myself, is this so good? Is this a pre-recorded thing? Because I could see people up here. Well, I knew there's people here, but I'm like, I wonder if they're like, wait, what do you call that when you're yeah, right. I mean, I knew they weren't, of course, right? But so that's a kudos to your music ministry. It's just balanced and good and right. But it went through my head. I'm like, they're back here and he's pushing some CD button. I mean, I knew better, but I still thought it. Participating in this congregation's educational opportunity is important to my faith development. We see this across the board, which is that could be stronger. We could have more people involved in our educational stuff, and that's a shift that we see across congregations in this country. Is that's not as strong as what it used to be, right? Anyway, so perhaps something to talk about or noodle on a little bit down the road. There are opportunities to develop deeper relationships in this congregation. And you can see this one obviously is strongly related to that matter of belonging. You can have a sense of belonging. I don't know that you can have a sense of belonging without that being grounded in relationships, right? So there's a pretty significant tie here. And so, again, you have got vast majority of people have that. And yet, we want to pay attention. We want to say, but we've got people who aren't connected as they could be. Again, it could be that Tim Johnson's going to be sitting in the back pew by himself and I want to be left alone. That could be. But it also could be that, and in any faith community, we've got that. I think that's huge because, statistically, we'll see things over and over. Tomorrow we may hear some of this, but one of the rising struggles of people today is loneliness. It's loneliness. People aren't connected. And as a faith community, at our best, we're really, really good at that, right? And we want to, that's that whole matter of keeping an eye out for who's on the periphery a little bit, because that's a quiet place, hard place to be, is, in a lonely place in life when or if you're wanting to be more connected. So that's just, in my book, that's just huge. And it's one of the greatest gifts we have to give our relationships in the church, too. When we do ministry in this congregation, we're all on the same team. Again, a question of cohesiveness and unity. And, we've got about 2/3 who affirm that. My involvement in this congregation inspires me to tell others about how God is active in my life. And we've got, again, we've got about 1/3 who are 40%, who are kind of in the middle or to the left there. And this, in some ways, you're stronger than most congregations are. Your statistics are stronger and a little bit better than most. That said, excuse me, it is nonetheless this encouragement for us to be pushing the envelope with sharing our faith, right? We want to be, right? And how can someone else know, the beauty of forgiveness, the gift of mercy, the promise of eternal life? We sort of presume everybody kind of knows that stuff, so we don't really need to tell them. I think we need to remember that everybody doesn't know what unconditional love and grace is. They just don't, So we've got space to grow there. Worship experience inspires me, and it does. Last few things here, looking at embracing change, urgency, world view. Here's a big question. Our congregation is willing to take risks to fulfill its mission. What did you think this question was asking, or for Good Shepherd, right? Because it wasn't written for you. So you had to kind of locate that question in your mind. What do you think what is that about? Not the results as much as that. Taking risks, or what does that mean for, or what might that mean? What's in the water for you guys? So you have had conversation around, gee whiz, we keep growing and we're running out of space, or what are we going to do, right? That conversation has been emerging. What are the risks in even talking about that for you? Okay. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah, we had a big endeavor. We took steps forward with that and did that, right? And it didn't pan out as had been anticipated. Yep. And we haven't forgotten, which doesn't mean it's still bothering us, but we haven't forgotten. Yep. Okay. Sure. Fear. Yeah, could something like that happen again? Are we gonna would we bite off more than we could accomplish? Perhaps. Right. Okay. Yep. Right. Yeah. 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 The whole question of change. We all know that, right? It is not insignificant. How do we manage that? Yep. And for churches, we see that the greater clarity of mission and vision, um, that as that gets clearer about why does this matter, how does our mission, our vision, our life impact people's lives? In other words, why are we doing what we're doing, right? The clearer that is, and the more that's told, the more that fear dissipates. But yeah, it's there, and again, yeah, like you said, you get a bunch of Swedes and Norwegians together, and good luck. Yep. Yes. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Drawing people in, having people be a part of the conversation, informing, telling, meeting, conversing, praying, all those things. Yep. Those all are helpful ingredients. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Okay. New ideas are supported in this congregation. And here, most people agree with that. More are on the fence again. It's not unusual also with a lot sitting on the fence with those two is for people. I've had many people say, I don't know how to answer it because I'm not sure what you're talking about, or I'm not sure that the question, as I would answer it, is risks. Well, I think we'd be willing to take risks, but you got to tell me what risks you're talking about. So I'm going to be in the middle. Or new ideas? Yeah, but what new ideas? So sometimes that's what can help to change that is when there becomes a little bit greater clarity on those. Challenges in this congregation is seen as opportunities to grow. Again, getting at that matter of readiness or embracing change. And here, you're a little bit above the mark. But as we've been talking, growth, change is a challenge no matter what. It's important that this congregation make changes in order to live out its mission. And here you can see those results. This also, when the nature of the change or the nature of an initiative gets clear, enables people to effectively respond to that. Otherwise, it's kind of a little bit nebulous, right? I mean, you can read that too and say, well, yeah, maybe. But we've got at least half who say, I agree with that. So if you are part of the half that agreed with that, name something that you see in the future journey for Good Shepherd that has potential of needing some change. What card would you put on the table for consideration of change? Half of those who took the survey said, yeah, change. What might be there? It says for us to live out our mission, we need to do some changes. So the mission being sharing the shepherd's love, and contextually, in a number of ways that we described that, for us to do that better, for us to fulfill that, we need to be paying attention to a few things. What do you think those few things are? Okay? Yep. Yep. Good. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We're here to stay. Right. Yeah. But what about how do we best pay attention to the young generations as that's emerging? What are some of those uh, uh, changes that are happening? What are some of the things that we're hearing? So a lot of stuff is changing, right? I mean, and are we orienting around those things? Good. So we're not sure what they are yet, but we know that that's where we need to be diving deep in asking, in wondering together, praying together. What does it look like for a faith community to enter into this next chapter of life? Yep. Anybody else? Okay. Nice. Responsive to the needs of our community. Again, which would be precisely, right, what it is that is this, a part of what's happening in these couple of gatherings tomorrow is what is going on within our community and how are we want to be front and center. We want to be in the mix. And I'm not saying you're not, but we want to have both feet planted in the community. We're involved, invested, we're mindful, we're not sheltered from that. We're willing to get it's messy, right? There are questions, there's change, all those kinds of things, right? So what's that disposition look like for us to step more compassionately, more boldly? Because it's rough. You know, if anybody's done mission kinds of work, it's some of that. It's a beautiful thing, and yet it's a hard thing. Yep. When people's lives are hurting and struggling, it's rough to get in the middle of that. So that's relevant, right? Just as you're thinking about this matter of change, what cards might be on the table? Important to make changes within the next 6 months. We've got a lot in the middle here, which probably has a lot to do with whoa. What changes are we talking about in 6 months? We'll see those move towards strongly agree when there's a change that's coming that everybody's on board about, and it's just, right around the corner. Well, you've got some of that coming, but it's not that it's tomorrow, right? But there will be a point at which there'll be some more clarity around that 6-month piece. Worldview, I believe that God is active in the world today. There are ways to learn of God's truth outside of Scripture. You can kind of noodle on that. And here's one of these that is very personal, that idea, that belief. God works through me to carry out God's mission. It's what we do together. It's about God, but this incarnational God is working through the likes of a person like Tim Johnson, and that's wow. Are you kidding me? We're going to look at some priorities, okay? Each of the priorities, just by way of maybe helpful, maybe not, kind of has a reference letter next to each of them around 3 different aspects. Sustainability, those priorities that have an S. Something along the lines of interest in keeping or growing what exists, right? So growing worship attendance, that's a sustainability thing, okay? It's like, we just want to, we need more people, or we need more money, or those kinds of things. It's kind of a sustainability as opposed to impact, a little bit more focused on external outcomes. Entrepreneurial, there we go, change, imagination, and a couple of them relate there. So here this is congregational results. Out of all of these, answers the question, especially as you want to know maybe what are the top 2 or 3 here. Not unusual, I'm not surprised, right? Helping members recognize God at work in all aspects of their lives. Although I find it interesting, it's not only top priority, it's probably also one of those things that you are already doing in spades, But what I see that to mean is this is important and we want it to continue to be important, okay? Faith in daily life. Second one, advocating to improve the situation of those living in poverty within the community. It's a second priority for the congregation. Out of everything that's important, first one is faith active in daily life. The second one is, how is this place and how am I engaging people who are struggling? Specifically, the question, right, has to do with people living in poverty in the community. Exploring new and innovative ways to be church in today's culture. That statement, I love that statement. It goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, which is what are we needing to pay attention to with regard to change, next chapter of life for Good Shepherd? How are we going to unearth the answer to how we need to look? Doesn't mean everything gets turned upside down, but how do we do that? Worked with a church that had that one, that number 3 was either number 1 or 2. And as we talked about that, exploring new and innovative ways to be the church in today's society, kind of my question was, well, what does that mean? And almost universally, people kind of said, we don't know, but we know that it's important. And so what they did, in fact, I should circle back and find out some of what's been going on, is they formed a task force with that in mind. And they just said, we want a task force to get together to pray and talk around that. What is that? That's so important for us, but we don't know what it is. What is it? Who's doing what out there? What might that look like here for our congregation? Number 4, working with other area congregations to increase our ministry's impact in the community. 5, increasing worship attendance. Collaborating with other organizations. Again, a community-based one. Organizing more opportunities for community service and outreach. You can see how many of those top priorities for Good Shepherd has to do with who you are to your neighbors. It's huge. And you can see the next ones, kind of going down the list. I just say one word about the ones that are down at the bottom, right? Increasing the number of ministries run, becoming more invested in our neighborhood. Priorities can be lower rather than higher for a number of reasons. They could be lower because they're not as important as other ones. They can also be lower because they are important, but we're already doing them pretty well. So sometimes that's, for instance, enough said. So it doesn't mean good, bad, but it can mean, well, we don't need more ministries, right? I'll have churches where that rises to the high because you go through their bulletin and through their newsletter, and it's kind of like, well, there's not really a lot going on here, so then that one's going to rise high. You guys, you have like plenty of going on. It's like, we don't need more. Pastors are saying that anyway. So these will be something to circle back to, right? To say, what might we do with these? Last couple ones having to do with generosity. This congregation encourages me to be a good steward of my finances. Vast majority of people say, yeah, I am encouraged. And it's important for me to live generously, give generously my finances beyond my congregation. Part of that is an important just statement, a reality check for us as a church to say our giving and our generosity is not have exclusivity just within the faith community, right? But it's out and beyond. And to say, we affirm that. We see that and state that to be important. God's people are to be generous in all kinds of places. It's not just only here at church. Given what my congregation is doing, which of the following best represents what you plan to give over the next year? And this is said differently. Are you invested? Are you supportive of the direction and the trajectory of our church? And here we've got 44% who are saying more, and 53 are on the same. It's a significant number there. And so part of the work of this leadership team that we have together and the whole process moving forward is going to be moving a lot of the sames over to the mores, right? Because should Good Shepherd decide to do some significant renovation or expansion, which looks like that is on the horizon, the way that's going to happen is for most all of our families to find their way of helping to make that happen financially. So but this is a very strong starting point. So people, again, that I think rests there with, or is there through kind of optimism and affirmation of the church. What influences you're giving? Top for people here, personal faith and understanding of being generous in supporting God's work in the world. The effectiveness of our church's ministry and making a real difference in my life and lives of others. How well the church manages finances is in the middle. How engaged our church is in reaching out to the needs of the world is number 4. Current state of the economy is number 5. One of the things that I take notice of is with as high of a priority as we want and or is our outreach into the larger community, right? That we're at number 4, though, maybe in terms of what influences my giving, how engaged we are in reaching out to the needs of the world. So that's so much of what is on the hearts and the minds of Good Shepherd folk is that matter of making a difference out in the broader community here, right? Income and giving assessment. Again, we didn't have any information, but rather that was all self-reporting. And you can see the breakdown there, 3, 13, 33% is 50 to 100, 27, et cetera. So relatively speaking, an affluent congregation. And then what we did is we said, well, and then what's the relationship between this? And you can see that we've got growth opportunity, right? Because we have 4% who are giving $10,000 to $15,000. So 4% that are over 10,000, and yet I don't know how you add the 3 on the right, but that's 25. Over 50% are over 100,000 in income. So again, some opportunity. While you're a generous people, of course we find this everywhere. I'm never in a church that's done with their giving, right? But opportunity for some growth in giving here too. So here were some things that struck me. Points of interest. Strong sense of belonging and of making an impact is significant. And that's kind of been a thread through a lot of our conversations this afternoon, right? Relatively strong sense of being a cohesive community, and experiencing unity for a majority. Most people experience that. High energy and personal involvement is important for and experienced by most members. Worship is central and highly rated by most. About 3/4 feel connected and involved and invested in ministry. Just over half perceive differences of opinion are shared. Trust in leadership is well above average, though transparency could be stronger. Faith is important and integrated into most all members' daily lives. Missional focus drives most ministry decisions, yet clarity purpose could be stronger. Just over half see that change is necessary to accomplish future ministry. Just less than half anticipate growth in giving, though stewardship indicates plenty of opportunity for generosity to increase. And to make sure that we've been on the right church this whole time, that's you. So with that, just a couple questions to kind of toss back your way. Maybe one of them is simply, what most stood out for you or stands out of all of this? Is there one or a couple points or ingredients that has you thinking as we're pulling things together? It's a little bit of a data dump. Yes. Yep. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow, okay. No doubt, right? That's remarkable. Wow. Okay, 39 years old. That's very few are there. Very few. Yeah, well, maybe you're a good shepherd in Moorhead is probably like that. Yeah, I bet, right? Not many. Yes. Okay. 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 Yeah. 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 Yep. So that word change is just it's going to follow you. Okay. Yep. Yep. What is the change? Are we ready? Yep. To which I would say again, like I said before, there's a lot of work to do there, right? Clarification of what that next. I like to talk a lot about what's the next chapter of life for Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, and then that has to do with your mission, has to do with your vision, and it will have to do with change, but not before you're clear about why might we do what it is that we think we're saying we need to do, right? Okay. Anyone else? Anything that is sticking with you? Yep. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. Nice. Yep. Yeah. That whole mindfulness of how do we make sure that we're intentional about these. Sometimes they're simple, right? But it's critical. Like you say, when you're over here, you drag kids along. You get that experience of here's what it is to be a part of the church family and to do the work and to help. And yep. Yeah. So how are we going to create kind of that short list of some of those most important ingredients? Yeah. Good. And the importance fundamentally of our younger folks. How are we paying attention to them? Anyone else? Is there anything that you heard that, that surprised you or thought, that's not Good Shepherd? Hmm. Oh, okay. 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 Yep. That the experience of being welcoming, right, is not just a congregational one in individuals, and part of that is we need to be welcoming relationally, but also welcoming to the Holy Spirit, right? Welcoming to the Word. I mean, those are, yeah, and that's when we are, then God's doing a work on us. Anything that leaves you, last question, kind of burning question or burning issue, or leaves you wanting to know more, do more, pay attention? Yes. Yeah, good question. I was going to I was going to speak to that early on, and I just kind of walked past it. We generally like to see a little bit of a higher level of participation. And we're shooting for 50, 60% of the average weekly worship attendance. We're not looking at the whole membership. That said, we still know statistically, though, that even with these results, that even if we were to survey everyone, that there would not be a marked change in what we would discover. Would we discover some? Yes, absolutely. So it's taking it all with the recognition that we kind of coulda, woulda, should, could have had even another 100 or another 300 or whatever, and it would be interesting to see how different some of the results would be. But I've done enough of these to know that, and we've done that sometimes, where there's not a marked change unless you find a way to really get in that younger generation. Then we begin to answer some of those questions. kind of like, when you go to the doctor, get a blood test, they don't have to take out all of your blood, right? So surveys work similarly, sampling, if you will. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, yeah. Mhm. Bill Hybels, the pastor at Willow Creek, huge author and speaker for a long time, and he wrote a book called Holy Discontent. And it's a great book because it's exactly kind of getting at what you're talking about, which is to say, what is that holy discontent that God puts within us, right? Where there's some condition, some situation, God does not want us to be okay with it. What is that? So we ask that question as a congregation. What might be that thing for which we're not satisfied, right? Because then when you can really key into that, and again, that's missional, that's visionary, then that begins to ease the conversation of change, right? Again, the whole matter of like, what's the impact? For what purpose? To what end? But you're right, yeah. And that's not just Bismarck, right? I mean, that's the curse or the blessing of the Lutheran Church. So ironic, though, help me to remember that supposedly part of our DNA as a Lutheran entity is that we are formed in Reformation, right? We're at our best. That's what I like to say. I like to say, real Lutherans are always open to change. How's that? That's preachable. Yeah, that's part of our faith heritage. And so how do we reclaim that? How do we say, oh yeah, that's right. At our best, we will do anything for the gospel. Good question. What would I say? I will answer that, but not yet. Because I think there's more for me still yet to discover and learn. So, and then I will answer that. And in some ways, I'll get at that at the conclusion of this whole listening and discovery phase of stuff when I will really have drawn in all of those features, which doesn't mean I don't have some gut sense of some of those things. And so maybe I'll just answer it this way in a general way, is to say, you have an amazing opportunity here to do what you need to do, to make a change, to take a risk, because there is optimism. You're a healthy place. You're a gifted congregation. You're a loving family. And so with that, there's additional, I think, responsibilities that go along with that. And you are well positioned to figure out what's that step, what's that risk, what's that impact that we're wanting to do. So I think some of that is discovered through prayer, right? I mean, some of that is conversational. So a lot of that I think is prayer and asking God, you answer this question. But I'll look for my report. But I'll do that after I have a whole lot more conversations with people. But it's a good question. Right. Sure. And so that matter of, right, we have the same thing going on. Yep, adult children either are not going to church or are going someplace else. And some of that, I think, is as simple as this, which is to say, we want to go and see what there is to learn. And some of that is to be speaking with people. Well, why do you go there? What is that why does that click for you? And there are answers to that. They're very clear. They will have no hesitation in stating, what it is that engages them. So then the question becomes, do we need to be paying attention to some things that engage this younger generation a little bit differently, as do other faith communities? And what I know is that within the Lutheran tribe, and that's what we are, is we have a lot of counterproductive narratives going on that do not help us to get there. And by that I mean we've got a lot of things we tell ourselves that keep us safe from changing. We'll rattle them off someday. Anything else, and then we'll wrap. Well, like I said, at the beginning, this is the beginning of a conversation, right? So this is not the end, but this will be entrusted to leaders, and we'll be integrating and praying about and noodling on how do we take some next steps with some of this. And I would open invitation for you, as you have some discoveries, throw an email out to one of your staff, one of your pastors, somebody on the team to say, I was thinking about this, and give those thoughts. Write something down, turn that in. That's a value for us. So we want to hear from you. All right. Well, is there any football today? After yesterday, there's nothing left. Pastor Craig, would you close us with a prayer? And also with you.